How a humble boy from Argentina became the most powerful spiritual leader in the world. A man known for his simplicity, his love for the poor, and his courage to reform the church? This is the extraordinary life story of Pope Francis, the 266th Pope of the Roman Catholic Church. Let's dive into the life of a man who changed the way the world sees the Vatican. Pope Francis, born Jorge Mario Bergoglio, came into the world on December 17, 1936, in Buenos Aires, Argentina. He was the eldest of 5 children in a deeply religious, working-class family. His father, Mario José Bergoglio, was an Italian immigrant who worked as a railway accountant. His mother, Regina Maria Savori, also of Italian descent, was a homemaker who raised their children with firm values and a strong Catholic faith. From an early age, Jorge was known as a quiet, observant boy, often thoughtful, respectful, and deeply introspective. He loved spending time with his siblings and grandparents, and was especially close to his grandmother Rosa, who had a powerful influence on his spiritual life. It was she who first introduced him to the importance of prayer, compassion, and caring for others. Jorge's childhood was marked by simplicity and modesty. Like many families in Argentina at the time, the Bergoglios lived without luxury. They were not poor, but they understood the value of hard work, gratitude, and sharing what little they had. This grounded upbringing would shape Jorge's view of the world and guide his future leadership style. As a student, Jorge excelled in school. He had a sharp mind, particularly in literature and science, and was known among his classmates for his calm demeanor and quiet leadership. He was fascinated by chemistry and even enrolled in a technical secondary school to pursue it further. He later earned a diploma as a chemical technician and briefly worked in a food science lab. Outside of school, Jorge enjoyed reading classic literature, listening to traditional Argentine tango music, and cheering for his favorite soccer team, San Lorenzo. He was just like any other boy growing up in Buenos Aires, except for one difference. Deep down, he carried a growing sense that his life was meant for something more. He was also no stranger to hardship. As a young man, Jorge suffered from a severe respiratory infection that led to the removal of part of his lung. The illness left a permanent impact on his health, but it also deepened his empathy, especially for the sick and the vulnerable. Little did he know, the quiet streets of Buenos Aires would one day lead him to the heart of the Vatican. But even then, as a boy, Jorge Bergoglio was learning the most important lesson of all, that greatness begins with humility. In his early 20s, Jorge Mario Bergoglio was just like many other young men in Buenos Aires. He was intelligent, quiet, and deeply thoughtful. He had a passion for science and had enrolled in a local technical school to study chemistry. For a time, it seemed his future would lead him to a career in a laboratory, far from the church or the Vatican. But life had other plans. At the age of 21, Jorge suddenly fell gravely ill. He was diagnosed with severe pneumonia and a serious infection that affected his lungs. The illness was so severe that one of his lungs had to be partially removed, a rare and dangerous procedure at the time. He spent weeks in the hospital, isolated and uncertain about whether he would survive. During those long, silent days of recovery, something extraordinary began to stir inside him. In the stillness of the hospital room, surrounded by pain, solitude, and the mystery of life and death, Jorge began to reflect deeply on the meaning of his existence. He often spoke later about how the compassion of a nurse during this time had a profound impact on him. She was kind, attentive, and full of quiet faith. Her example planted a seed in Jorge's heart, the idea that true greatness lies in serving others. One day, while walking past the confessional in his local parish, he felt an overwhelming sense of peace and clarity, a moment he later described as a spiritual awakening. It was then that he knew his life would no longer be about chemistry, but about souls. Not long after, Jorge decided to abandon his scientific path and entered the seminary. He joined the Society of Jesus, also known as the Jesuits, a Catholic order known for its discipline, education, and commitment to social justice. Becoming a Jesuit was not an easy path. It meant years of intense study, vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, and a lifelong commitment to humility and service. But Jorge embraced it wholeheartedly. His illness had not only changed his body, it had transformed his spirit. From that moment forward, he lived not for himself, but for others, especially the forgotten, the poor, and the broken-hearted. That brush with death, that season of suffering, it became the beginning of a life dedicated to mercy, simplicity, and faith. a turning point that would one day lead him to the very heart of the Catholic Church. After his ordination as a Jesuit priest in 1969, Father Jorge Mario Bergoglio began a lifelong journey rooted in faith, simplicity, and service. While many others in positions of church leadership lived in comfort, Father Jorge stood out for his deep commitment to humility. He chose to walk among the people, not above them. In the 1970s and 1980s, during a time of intense political turmoil in Argentina, especially during the country's brutal military dictatorship, Bergoglio worked quietly behind the scenes to protect people in danger. While some criticized him for not speaking louder during that era, many later revealed how he had sheltered and saved lives in secret. He believed that real courage didn't always come with headlines. Sometimes, it was about doing the right thing quietly, when no one else was watching. As a Jesuit leader, Bergoglio was known for his strong discipline, but also for his compassion. He taught philosophy and theology in seminaries, mentored young priests, and emphasized personal holiness and direct service to the poor. His homilies were simple but powerful. He didn't use fancy words. Instead, he spoke to the hearts of people, about love, grace, and the need to walk with the poor. In 1992, he became Auxiliary Bishop of Buenos Aires, and by 1998, he was appointed Archbishop. Even then, his lifestyle didn't change. He refused to move into the luxurious bishop's residence. Instead, he chose a modest apartment. He gave up a chauffeured car and took the bus to work. Every morning, he cooked his own breakfast and prepared his own homilies. People called him the Bishop of the Slums.
Why?
Because he spent so much of his time in Villas Miseria, the poorest neighborhoods of the city. He would walk through the muddy streets, talk with struggling families, pray with the sick, and listen to those who felt forgotten. To many, he wasn't just a priest. He was a friend, a father figure, and a voice of hope. What made him truly different was that he didn't seek power or prestige. He didn't chase titles. He simply followed the gospel and lived it. His humility was not for show. It was genuine, and it earned him deep respect not just from Catholics, but from people of all backgrounds across Argentina. Long before he became Pope, Jorge Bergoglio was already leading by example, quietly, faithfully, and with a heart fully dedicated to God and to the people. In early 2013, the Catholic Church was facing a moment of crisis. Pope Benedict XVI had made the unexpected decision to resign, the first pope to do so in nearly 600 years. His resignation sent shockwaves through the Catholic world and left the Church at a crossroads. A new leader was needed, someone who could rebuild trust, modernize the Church, and reach out to the millions of people feeling distant from religion. In March of that year, 115 cardinals from around the globe gathered in the Sistine Chapel in Vatican City to elect a new pope. Among them was Cardinal Jorge Mario Bergoglio of Argentina. Though respected, he was not seen as a frontrunner. He was quiet, humble, and had previously declined higher positions within the Church's hierarchy. But during the conclave, something remarkable happened. Cardinal Bergoglio's humility, wisdom, and pastoral heart touched many of his fellow cardinals. After 5 rounds of voting, on March 13, 2013, white smoke rose from the chimney of the Sistine Chapel. The world waited in anticipation as the announcement was made, "Habemus Papam," we have a pope. Jorge Mario Bergoglio had been chosen. And in a move that surprised even the cardinals, he chose the name Francis, after Saint Francis of Assisi, a symbol of peace, simplicity, and love for the poor. This choice was not just symbolic, it was historic. He became the first pope from the Americas, the first Jesuit pope, and the first non-European pope in over 1,200 years. For many, his election represented a powerful shift, a movement away from traditional power centers in Europe toward the global south, where Catholicism was growing rapidly. When he appeared on the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica for the first time as pope, he did not raise his arms in triumph. Instead, he stood silently, humbly, and then bowed his head, asking the crowd to pray for him before he prayed for them. That moment said everything about the man he was. He wore simple white robes, rejected the ornate red cape, and refused to ride in the lavish papal limousine. From the very beginning, Pope Francis signaled a new era, one focused not on grandeur, but on service, humility, and compassion. From the streets of Buenos Aires to the global stage of the Vatican, his journey was not only remarkable, it was revolutionary. From the very moment he stepped out onto the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica, Pope Francis was different. He didn't raise his hands in triumph. He didn't speak first. Instead, he simply bowed his head and asked the crowd to pray for him. That one act set the tone for his entire papacy, a pope not of power, but of humility. A pope of the people. Unlike previous popes, Francis refused the luxurious red shoes and gold-trimmed papal garments. He wore simple white robes and a modest cross around his neck, the same one he had worn for years as a bishop in Argentina. When asked about the change, he simply said, "The carnival is over." He was signaling to the world, this would be a different kind of papacy. Pope Francis also made the radical decision not to live in the lavish apostolic palace. Instead, he chose a small apartment inside the Vatican guesthouse, known as the Casa Santa Marta. He eats in the common dining hall with other priests, often carrying his own tray and sitting with staff. He answers his own phone calls. And when he travels around Rome, he doesn't use a limousine, he rides in a small Fiat, or sometimes even takes the bus. But humility is not just about simplicity. It's about where your heart is. And Pope Francis's heart has always been with the marginalized, the poor, the sick, the forgotten. In his first Holy Week as Pope, he shocked the world by going to a juvenile prison and washing the feet of young inmates, including Muslims and women, breaking centuries of tradition. When asked why, he said, "Who am I to judge?" A phrase that became famous around the world, especially as he spoke about compassion for the LGBTQ+ community, the divorced, and others often pushed to the margins of the church. He visits slums in Africa, embraces lepers, comforts refugees. He's known for secret night walks in Rome, quietly visiting the homeless and bringing food, without cameras, without media. Francis has also used his voice to confront global issues. He's spoken out boldly against consumerism, environmental destruction, and income inequality. In his groundbreaking letter Laudato Si, he called for urgent action on climate change, urging world leaders to care for our common home. While his actions have drawn both admiration and criticism, one thing is clear. Pope Francis doesn't lead from above, he walks among the people. He challenges the Church to move away from judgment and toward mercy. He challenges leaders to serve, not dominate. He challenges all of us, regardless of faith, to care more, love deeper, and live simply. That's why so many call him not just Pope Francis, but the people's Pope. Pope Francis is not just the head of the Catholic Church, he has become one of the most influential moral voices on the global stage. His leadership extends far beyond religion, touching issues that affect the entire human family. Since becoming Pope in 2013, Francis has traveled to over 60 countries, often choosing to visit places marked by poverty, war, or suffering. He has made historic visits to refugee camps, war-torn nations, and regions affected by religious conflict. In 2015, he visited the United States and addressed a joint session of Congress, the first pope in history to do so. His message was powerful, a call to defend human dignity, protect the poor, and care for the planet. Francis is widely known for his outspoken stance on climate change. In 2015, he released an encyclical titled Laudato Si, urging the world to care for the earth as our common home. He called environmental destruction a sin, and he challenged world leaders to rethink economics, energy, and development for the sake of future generations. His words influenced the 2015 Paris Climate Agreement, where leaders from around the globe pledged to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. He has also spoken boldly about inequality and economic injustice. Francis frequently criticizes what he calls a throwaway culture, a society where the poor, the elderly, the unborn, and the marginalized are forgotten. He believes that the global economy should serve people, not the other way around. In his words, money must serve, not rule. On interfaith dialogue, Pope Francis has made historic strides. In 2019, he signed the document on human fraternity with the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar in Abu Dhabi, a call for peace, understanding, and cooperation between Christians and Muslims. He's met with Jewish leaders, Orthodox Christians, Buddhists, and even atheists, emphasizing that human dignity must come before religious divisions. In 2021, he became the first pope to visit Iraq, a country scarred by decades of violence. There, he met with Christian communities that had survived ISIS persecution and prayed alongside Muslim leaders for peace. It was a moment of healing and historic unity. While many of his actions have been praised, Pope Francis has also faced criticism, from both traditionalists who feel he's too progressive and from reformers who believe he hasn't gone far enough. But despite the tension, he continues to urge the Church and the world to move forward with compassion, dialogue, and justice. His influence is undeniable. Time magazine named him Person of the Year in 2013. Global leaders listen to him. Millions admire him. And even those outside the Catholic Church often describe him as a man of deep integrity. In a world often divided by politics, religion, and ideology, Pope Francis stands as a bridge builder, reminding us that, above all, we are one human family. Pope Francis reminds us that true power lies not in titles or riches, but in service, humility, and love. From the streets of Buenos Aires to the heart of the Vatican, his journey inspires millions to live with purpose, compassion, and hope. If you found this story meaningful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow Health 999 for more inspiring biographies and wellness stories that touch the soul.